Economic systems. What is an economic system? We hear the term a lot, the economy of this country, the economy of that country, the economic system of such and such country. But what do we really mean? An economic system is society's way of organizing resources to answer three basic questions that all societies face. What goods and services will be produced? How will they be produced? And who will get these goods and services? By goods and services, I basically mean, what is a society going to make? Is that society going to focus on the production of food, on the production of cars, on the production of equipment? What needs to be made or produced within a society? How will these goods and services or equipment, cars, food be made, and who will get these? There are many economic systems and many beliefs about how these questions should be addressed. Ultimately, I think the answer lies in the system or combination of systems that gives the people of a country food on the table, jobs that provide a livable wage, and an opportunity to increase and improve standards of living and quality of life. I'm going to focus on two main economic systems. One is the capitalist free market or free enterprise system, and the other one is the command system, sometimes known as the communist system. We have also mixtures of both within our global environment. The capitalist system has five main tenets or principles. The first is the right to private property. The second is the right to economic freedom. The third is economic incentives. The fourth is competitive markets. And the fifth is a limited role of government. I'm going to go through each one of these one by one and explain what these mean. One of the key tenets of the free enterprise or capitalist system is private property. Private property means that an individual or a business has the right to own the resources of production. Private property is owned by an individual or by a business. And for example, you may own your house or some land or some equipment, your computer, your books, your television set. That is your private property. Also, your intellectual property is part of your property. And we can tell a lot about a society by who owns the property, because property ownership implies wealth. Wealth implies power. So, for example, if you are renting an apartment, the decision about whether or not you can have children in the apartment or pets in the apartment is with your landlord and not with you. So therefore, since the property owner owns the apartment complex, they have the ability to exert power over your decision making. You will also hear the term public property. So public property is property that is owned by society or the government. And it's important to know those differences. Examples of public property are commonly shared infrastructure, like public schools, parks, public libraries, water, air. Public goods are called non-excludable, and that basically means that we can't exclude people from using public property. They are also called non-rivalrous, which means that everybody can enjoy that public good. For example, if the city has a fireworks demonstration, everybody gets to enjoy it. My enjoyment of that fireworks demonstration does not mean that you can't enjoy it. Everybody enjoy it. And so in that way, it's called non-rivalrous. So it's not possible to exclude particular individuals from public property. And that is different than private property, which is property that you own or a business owns. So along with the privilege of having private property, which is a privilege that is often taken for granted, we have the right to use our private property as we choose. We have the right to transfer our property to someone else, as in gifting land to our children or gifting a car to our friend. We have a right to use that property and to transfer it to other people. We also have the right to benefits of that property. And so if we have a piece of land that we want to rent out, we can rent it and we can receive compensation for the use of that property by someone else. The right to the benefits of the property also includes intellectual property rights. Intellectual property includes things that you create. It could be music, art, video, a patent, a new invention can be patented. So you have a right to all of those benefits in a capitalist system. One of the benefits of owning private property is that as owners, we tend to take better care of private property. That's because it's in our own self-interest to keep that property in good condition. We're more likely to take care of our own property than public property. How often have you seen somebody driving down the freeway and they casually toss a fast food bag onto the highway out of their car? They don't really care because this is public property. Nobody has a direct responsibility for it. They're less likely to take that trash bag and toss it out to their front yard because their front yard is their own personal property. So under a capitalist system, we think that private property also has that benefit of the fact that people are going to be taking more care of their own property, and they have more of a personal responsibility to take care of it. This is why it's especially difficult to address issues such as global warming, climate change, pollution, because it's difficult to assign responsibility to individuals or businesses for this. Another tenet of the capitalist system is called economic freedom. When we say economic freedom, what we mean is that we are free to voluntarily cooperate with each other while pursuing our own separate interests. Economic freedom is important to both businesses and individuals. In a pure enterprise system, businesses own or have the following freedoms. For businesses, they have the right to start a business, they have a right to close a business. They have a right to purchase any resource that they can as long as they can pay for it. They have the right to use any level of technology that they choose to use, the right to produce a product and offer it for sale, and the right to invest it, their monies and their returns in any way they see fit. For individuals, we have the right to buy any good or service available as long as we can pay for it. We have the right to offer our services, to get a job, and we have the right to quit a job if we don't like our job. So we have the right to use our own resources in whatever way we wish, as long as it is consistent with the rights of others. So that's an important thing to remember. We have the right to use our resources as long as it's consistent with the rights of others, as long as we're not harming other people. We should also keep in mind that the rights to these do not guarantee success. A business person has the right to produce whatever they want, but if the consumer doesn't want it, that success is not guaranteed. So because we as consumers have the right to buy whatever we choose to buy. So economic freedom is an important part of the free enterprise system because it allows us to pursue our own self-interest. And this encourages us to be productive. And as we said earlier, businesses have the right to produce, consumers have the right to purchase. We have economic incentives in the capitalist system, and in a free enterprise or capitalist or market system, we have the incentive to work harder or more productively so that we can achieve a better standard of living. If we are more productive, we will get rewarded with something of value to us. That could be money, that could be more disposable income, that could be time, it could be better work hours, and all this might lead us to a better standard of living, and that is our economic incentive. As we increase our productivity, we can increase our accumulation of property, and as we accumulate property, we become wealthier. We also have economic penalties. There is no guarantee of success. Those penalties can include job loss, business failure, a miscalculation on needed production. And these failures tell us that we need to redirect our private property use to output that is more valued by society. A key assumption for the capitalist system is that we have competitive markets. Competitive markets means that we have so many buyers and sellers that together they interact and determine the pricing of products and services and what products and services will be producing. The perfectly competitive market helps us answer our three questions. What will get produced? Individuals and businesses are going to produce those goods and services that the buyer wants. Goods and services that are in demand will have a higher price. Resources will flow to the production of those goods and services most valued by society. This means that if a product has a high price and buyers want it, businesses are going to put their people towards the production of that product, and they're going to use their resources to produce more of that product because this is what society wants. So in that way, it determines what will get produced. So our dollar votes in the capitalist system. Where we spend our money guides the decisions of what will be produced. How will goods and services be produced? Goods and services will be produced in the least cost manner. Why? Because if we lower cost, profits increase. And if profits increase, wealth increases. Now, does least cost mean poor quality? No, of course not. The consumer has the right to not buy a product. If the product that is put out into the market is poor quality, the consumer has the right to say, no, I don't want to buy that because of its poor quality. When that happens, the businesses will be forced to adjust the quality of their product if they want to remain in business. So third, for whom will the product be produced? The product or service will be produced for the buyers that are willing and able to buy the product. So if you, the consumer, you don't have enough money to buy a product, you don't get it. Okay, if you have enough money, then you get it. And so this is how the decision of who gets what is made is in perfectly competitive markets. If you have the money to purchase the product, you have access to it, and if you don't get it. In a perfectly competitive market, we also assume that we have perfect information, and perfect information is conveyed through prices. The dollar votes, and the price of a product conveys perfect information about that product. For example, if I tell you, I went out to dinner last night and I spent $5, you can probably guess where I went. I went to a fast food restaurant. I probably had hamburgers or tacos. And so that price of $5 tells you what I probably had for dinner. If I tell you I went out to dinner last night and I spent $50, well, again, you would know, oh, $50 on a dinner just for her. Well, she probably had steak. She might have had lobster. Pricing tells you a lot about the product that you're going to consume. And so in a perfectly competitive market, it's very important that the interaction of buyers and sellers help determine what the price is that you, the consumer, are going to pay. And by doing that, it also tells the consumer about the value of that product, about the quality of the product, about the demand for that product. So in perfectly competitive markets, prices serve as signals about the product. Okay, finally, in a capitalist system, government has a limited role. So what is the role of government in a capitalist system? Government's role is to establish what we call the rules of law. And you've probably heard a lot about the rules of law in the news lately. Rule of law means that we follow and act, the government follows and acts as an umpire to make sure that businesses and individuals in society is playing by the rules. According to the World Justice Project, the rule of law is a durable system of laws, institutions, societal norms, and community commitment that delivers the following: accountability. The government, as well as private actors, are accountable under the law. The laws are clear, publicized, and stable. Stability is important because if people know what the laws are, they can then conduct their business and conduct their personal life in accordance with clear, publicized, and stable laws. The laws also need to be applied evenly, and fundamental rights need to be protected. And these include the security of persons, of contracts, property, and human rights. A third principle of the rule of law is that there's open government. The process by which laws are enacted, administered, and enforced are accessible, fair, and efficient. So citizens know what is going on and how those laws are going to be developed, how they will be implemented in our society, and we need to know that they are enforceable. And finally, accessible justice. Justice is delivered in timely, competent, ethical, and independent manner by people who are neutral and independent, and that there are adequate resources, that justice reflects the communities that are being served. So this is a very important function of government, and one that we take for granted many times. Finally, the role of government is national defense, policing, and fire protection. Okay. On the other extreme, from the capitalist system, we have the command system. And in the command system, guess what? The command system asks the three same basic questions. What should be produced in a society? How should this be produced? And who should benefit from that output? And in a capitalist system, these questions are answered by a government-controlled central planning agency. Unlike a free market where we have many buyers and sellers determining what is demanded and what should be produced, in a command system, there is one agency making those decisions. There is no ownership of personal, private property. All property belongs to the state. And what this means then is that there is a bigger concentration within government. Okay, and of course, with a concentration of property, that also means a concentration of wealth and power. Additionally, there are no property rights because if you don't own property, you don't need property rights, which means that your intellectual property is not yours either. In terms of economic freedoms, individuals do not have the ability to own businesses or the right to use technology, and they don't have the right to use personal property or intellectual property rights. This means that individuals don't have an incentive to produce. The central government owns all the businesses. They have monopoly power over the businesses, and they decide what will be produced and how it will be produced. These governments own businesses, and they appoint managers who, in turn, because they don't own the businesses or share in profits, they have little or no incentive to make businesses more productive. In terms of pricing, unlike a free market where the price is set by buyers and sellers, Pricing in a command system is set by central planners without any real understanding of whether or not the product being put into that market is in fact wanted or needed. So this leads to inefficiency and a misallocation of resources. So command systems have proven to be inefficient. Basically, command systems have not increased the well-being of people as they had originally contemplated. I don't think any economic system is put into place to deliberately hurt people, but sometimes these systems just don't work. Today, the only pure command systems are in North Korea and in Cuba. The Soviet Union was a pure command system, and its economy broke down during the 1980s, resulting in its dissolution in December 1991. China has emerged from being a strictly command system into being more of a market system, a mixed market economy, as is the United States. So let's take a look at what a mixed market economy is. In a mixed market economy, we have private ownership of resources, freedom of enterprise, freedom of choice, self-interest, competition, markets and prices. All of that sounds like a capitalist system, but we have a mix of decision-making when there is more active government. So in the previous slides, I had asked you to listen to the NPR discussion about masks and should masks be worn. And government becoming more involved in our market economy is more active participation by the government to help protect its citizens. So a mixed market economy is going to take features of the capitalist system and features of having more government control and blend those two together. Okay. So government's going to respond to market failures. So a market failure is when the interaction of supply and demand and buyers and sellers don't produce desired outcomes, and there's some maybe some damage that is done. Maybe there's a product out there that everybody needs, like a vaccine, and maybe some people can't afford it. Government will come in and help subsidize and pay for those. Okay. So second, government agencies act to encourage or discourage the consumption of certain goods and services. The prohibition of drugs like heroin, cocaine is an example of government seeking to discourage consumption of these drugs. Another thing that government does in a market economy is that it redistributes income through programs such as welfare and social security. Government can use its spending and tax policies to influence economic activity and the price level. So in all these ways, government has an active role in a market economy to further the standards of living of their people. So here I've prepared for you a little flow chart or a chart that gives you the attributes of each system. We have the command economy, market socialist economic systems, and the laissez-faire capitalist or free enterprise system.